All right, let's check out what's trending on the London street with my colleague, Juliana. Good morning, Juliana.
Good morning, Chimese. Nice to see you in the morning.
Nice to see you too. Anyway, the UK is set to checkmate activities on the social media by giving the communication watchdog Ofcom the power to make tech firms responsible for protecting people from harmful content such as violence, terrorism, cyberbullying, and child abuse. That's welcoming, isn't it? And is it yet known what perhaps penalties Ofcom will be able to impose on those firms who fail to comply?
Well, it's absolutely welcoming, especially in the UK. It's been a long time coming. There have, over the past couple of years, been some quite terrible horror stories about young teenagers who have felt the need to either self-harm or, as worse as it goes, commit suicide because of the kind of content that they've been seeing online. There's one particular story about a 14-year-old girl who was viewing some really dark images and videos on Instagram, and her father has been a long-time campaigner with the government. We're expecting today the Culture Secretary, Nicky Morgan, to announce new measures to mitigate against teenagers and young adults from seeing this content, and they're using this with Ofcom. Now, Ofcom are a regulator that typically in Britain regulate what we see on TV or radio. So if you watch something and you're not happy, you give Ofcom a call and they weigh themselves in. So now what the government are trying to do is widen Ofcom's remit so they can deal with this online issue. And this will affect the big tech firms like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and even WhatsApp. So it's seen as a good thing. This is a temporary measure. Ofcom, of course, talk about broadcasting in the UK. It's extremely wide, and some are asking whether or not they are fit for purpose to do this online. But it is a short-term measure until the government can find some sort of regulator that can work within the online community, but that will be starting as soon as possible. And the issues that some of the ways they'll be tackling some of this footage is by fining the companies hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. And we know that those big tech firms certainly don't like that.
Talking about those amount of money, an interesting one there. Care workers in the UK are asking to be paid fairly for their overnight shifts. Now, the case will be heard today at the Supreme Court. What will this mean for the organizations providing care who hire these workers if, the case pulls through?
Well, this is a big issue, and it's a long-running crisis for the care industry in the UK. It is seen as a crisis industry. There have been so many undercover investigative documentaries that have aired in UK TV showing just how understaffed, undertreated some of the people who need the most care are, the most vulnerable, the elderly and the disabled. So unions for years have been saying that when these workers are working overnight, staying in people's homes, they should be paid at least the minimum wage, which they haven't been. And so this has gone to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will be hearing two individual cases today that could set a precedent. And what the care industry is saying is that we just don't have the money, that austerity has really kicked in. Austerity is what the Labour Party have been talking about for years and years, and there have been cuts to council benefits and just how much they're able to pay these companies. And they're saying it's not because, they're trying to be unscrupulous. They just can't afford it. And they're worried that if indeed this case does go through today and these two individuals do win, then there'll be a back pay of potentially up to millions and millions of pounds. And then in case these care industries would be made bankrupt.
That's a serious one there. Anyway, let's look at the corporate news out there. Online shopping company Ocado posted about £214.5 million loss. That was last year. Yet, its boss, Tim Steiner, gets £54 million bonus. How did that happen?
Well, it happened because he's the CEO, and you know, this is one of those cases that's definitely going to be picking up the headlines. That 58 million pounds in bonuses, Chimezie, is one of the highest payouts that a British chief executive officer has ever seen, and it has made some people have cause for concern, particularly as we have had some really quite high profile cases of companies going bust, no less than Thomas Cook. And then you find out that their CEOs were receiving so much money, and that 58 million pounds in bonuses was on top of his salary. Some are saying, you know, it's completely fair. You know, if you was to have invested £1,000 in Ocado about 5 years ago, that £1,000 is now worth about £7,000. But recently, especially over the past 18 months, they have been in trouble. They're certainly expanding, particularly in Asia, but they had a massive fire in a warehouse just in the north of London, and that's really knocked out some of their profits. So there were losses at the beginning of 2019 of about £40 million. That's extended to over £200 million. And some people are saying, well, if you're losing so much money, why are you allowing to pay out your chief boss £58 million in salary? And this has been a discussion that's been ongoing in the UK, so much so that last year MPs were saying that any CEO that receives an eye-watering sum of money should be asked to talk about it and, you know, defend being given that bonus, which could be quite interesting. But look, you know, Steiner, he is definitely managed to get himself into the super rich list of the UK, and it's just a very few of them, let me tell you that, Shimei.
Interesting. Anyway, Juliana, I don't know if you witnessed the last census in the UK, and now the national statistician is saying that the 2021 census could be the last one ever to be carried out. What is his reason for this, and what new strategies is he coming up with?
Well, you know, the census has changed. I believe, you know, Britain is trying to push itself as being the first to go ahead with net zero emissions. The census in the UK has been going for over 200 years. It happens every 10 years. The government like to know who is living where, what you're doing, how much you're earning, not just for their own data, but it does help with local councils and knowing just whether or not they need to build more hospitals, more schools. And it's a lot of paperwork, and also it costs a lot of money. In 2021, the census is expected to cost the government over £1 billion. And this statistician, who hasn't been on the job for long, is just wondering whether or not it's worth it and whether there could be alternative ways to find this data without having to knock on everybody's door and ask everybody in a house to write out exactly what they're doing at what time. So he's suggesting that we could use information that's been given in the NHS, information that's been given at schools. Of course, everywhere you go in the UK now, they're collecting your data. And he seems to think that that's a more viable way. But next year's one will go ahead. But I suppose it's up to whoever will take over from Boris Johnson in 5 years as to whether or not they want to proceed doing it in 2031 and beyond.
All right, Juliana, it's a brand new day. Lead us into the market street. What are the opening numbers saying? And are there corporate news to watch out for?
It's a little bit dry on the corporate front. The FTSE 100 opened 18 points higher today. Again, the coronavirus, you know, 1 minute it's affecting the markets, the next minute it is not. I think London had definitely taken their cue from Asia, and it didn't seem to be too rattled at what's been going on overnight. Yes, there are over 1,100 deaths, but it seems to be, and don't quote me on this, that the coronavirus may have plateaued. So the sentiment in London is pretty positive. The pound is worth $1.29. It's trading about 0.01% lower at early trading.
Well, we'll see what happens at intraday, and you'll be having that conversation with my colleague there, PC. Enjoy the rest of the day. And it's in that note we draw the curtain on today's edition of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago.